I'm Will Scott, a longtime friend of Mike's and Shelley, and the family honored me by asking me to act as the MC and sort of keep things moving along. Shelley also, and all of you who are here who know Shelley well, prepared a script for me. That's one of the reasons I love Shelley. We're here to celebrate the many different aspects of Mike's life, things that he has done as a friend and as a community activist and as a community leader. Shelley thought long and hard about what she wanted to have happen today, and she selected a number of Mike's closest friends and business associates to make a few brief remarks. After we make those brief remarks, then there will be a time for anyone who's present who wants to say anything about Mike at all. And remember that Mike loved a good joke and a good story, so don't hold back about what kind of story you tell, because I'm sure they'll all be fun and happy stories. The first person that Shelley would like to have come up and speak about Mike is his brother David. David is going to share a little bit with us all about what it was like to have Mike as a brother, and I'm really anxious to hear what he has to say, because I know what Mike was like as a friend, and there could often be surprises in that. So David, would you come up and introduce the family and speak a little bit about Mike?
Thank you, Will.
And if you want to just let me slip this on you. There you go.
How's that? Is that working? Sure. You hear me back there? Yes. Great. Super. Wow. So I'm David A. Miron, the older brother of Michael Francis Miron, who was my best friend. And I'm sorry, where's the box of tissues? They promised me a box of tissues and a glass of water. What do you mean? All right, I got the water. We're going to need the tissues. This is not going to be easy. Thank you. So my wife Bernadette just handed me the tissues, my wife of 51 years, and she's here with me. So welcome to this celebration of Mike's life and contributions. On behalf of Shelley, Linnea, the Myron, and the Rowe families, thank you for being here. This is, as you can see from the turnout, it's just fabulous. Reading the coverage in the Annapolis Gazette, there's no doubt that you, Mike's brothers and sisters of Eastport, Annapolis, are part of the family of Mike Miron. Mike Miron created for himself here in Eastport a family. Arriving here in his late 20s with his master's degree in economics from the University of Maryland, he built over a span of 40 years a home for himself. A home he missed growing up. So for the first third of his life, he didn't quite have the home he's had here in Eastport for the last 2/3 of his life. And you, his extended family, brothers and sisters, are part of it. So, how about Meal Train? Anybody here been on the Meal Train? Meal Train members? There are 33 of you. Where are you? Where are you? Raise your hand. Come on, don't be bashful. Do you have any idea how welcome it was to say, "What's for dinner tonight, Shelley?" Fabulous. And the meals were terrific. They were just great. How about Caring Bridge? Anybody a reader or a commenter on Caring Bridge? How about at the least you put a heart on one of Shelley's terrific posts? Yes. Yeah, just fabulous. There are 170 of you. And Shelley, as she chronicled Michael's journey, it was just fabulous. Her Caring Bridge post took our breath away. There's just no doubt about it. Bernadette and I live in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida. We'd have people call us up and say, I can't believe it. This is just fabulous. She's kept us close to Mike, and she's helped us understand her grief, which I've described to myself as probably the worst case of jet lag you've ever had with a side of tears. Just awful, just awful. So, Michael loved Shelley with his whole heart and soul. She was a rock during the final journey. No husband could have asked for more love, devotion, and support. Michael was a proud father to Linnea, who is here with, I'm looking for a close friend, Ricky Williams is coming. He's coming. So you'll see Ricky later. Linnea is known to Mike as little stuff. Mike is big stuff. So when little stuff walks into the room, big stuff just lights up. It was just terrific to see over the last month. The greeting between the two of them was just fabulous. And I'm in deep admiration, as everybody else is, of Linnea as she juggled caring for her dad, supporting Shelley, and managing a real estate practice from Los Angeles. We love you, Linnea. We love you, Shelley. Shelley's sister Allison is here with her husband, Jerry Trimble. She's here from Portland, Oregon for the second time in a month. Thank you, Allison. Your presence means the world to Shelley, to Mike, to us. We love you too. Michael was a caring brother to his older brother and his godfather, Henry Jerome Miron, who can't be with us today because of poor health. He has sort of Parkinson's, except he doesn't call it that. So in 2014, we call him Jerry. He moved to Sun City shortly after his beloved wife Patricia passed, and Michael did an incredible service to Jerry. Jerry is the brother that Elaine Moyer, if you read the column in the Annapolis Gazette, she referred to him as the expert in collaborative behavior that he worked so hard on in the community here. Jerry will be 85 on August 6th. And we send love to Jerry, hoping he will turn 56 soon. Michael was an uncle to 3 nieces and 5 nephews. His 3 nieces are here. From my brother Billy, Terry Myron Bonkowski of Palmyra, New Jersey is here with her husband, Leo. Billy passed from lung cancer at age 53. From my brother Jim are Suzanne Myron Eshelman of Coconut Creek, Florida, and Michelle Myron of New Smyrna Beach, Florida. Jim passed from lung cancer at age 71. His wife Marianne and son Jimmy also died of cancer. One nephew was going to be here, our only son, Bernadette and I's only son, David Paul Myron, but he had an accident yesterday. He took ill. He's doing okay, but he could not make the journey. Michael has 10 grandnieces and nephews, and one is here today, Mark Bonkowski, with his mother and father, Terry and Leo. And Mark, we're happy to see you, and we have a special gift for you. Thank you. I also want to say a word to my friends of Michael and all the Myrons, Dennis and Mary Daly, who made the trip from New York and but live in Philadelphia. So to give you an idea of the kind of uncle Mike was, let me describe a chain of text messages I received from my grandson, Torrin Myron, age 13, the son of our son, David Paul. It goes something like this. David, I'm sorry about your brother Mike. Thank you, Torrin. I miss him. Was he the one who used to sneak up behind me and whistle Burke holes in my ear? Yes. What was Uncle Mike's favorite color? Green. I asked what his favorite color was because it is a surprise for you. When you come to see me play football on Thursday the 15th, and he lives in Cedarburg, Wisconsin. We had this trip planned some time ago. I am going to wear something green for you. God bless Torrin. So let me tell you about Mike and why he worked so hard to make Eastport a place he could call home. Michael Francis Myron was born January 15, 1945, as the last of 6 children of Henry Jerome Myron, Sr., and Helen Elizabeth Daly, 5 boys and 1 girl. 5 years separated us, but we were as close as you can be with that age difference. Our mother died of cancer when I was 12 and Mike 7. We took the news in hindsight as I thought about this moment like Stoics. It hit me, facing him for 16 of the 22 days he was here. He faced his illness just like that day in November 1952 when Mom passed. I knew, he said, when he came home from first grade and met me at our home in Brown Street in Philadelphia. I think it may be my time, he said in early August to Bernadette and me. Remarkable, absolutely remarkable. Our mother's sister, unmarried, stepped in to mother us. Aunt Kit did a terrific job. Our father was around and sometimes helpful. Our brother Bill, Terry's dad, was a big help and kept us together. Brother Jim took Mike into his home during Mike's high school years at Roman Catholic in Philadelphia, the same high school that 3 of his brothers went to. Mike's commute from Vineland, New Jersey, where Jim lived, and of course he had his sibling sisters, cousins, nieces, Suzanne and Michelle, but it was an hour and a half each way. He did that every day. And Mike was a big brother to Sue and Michelle. I don't recall any big disagreements the two of us had over the years. If you followed us on Caring Bridge, you know that 2 weeks ago today, I cooked him scrapple for breakfast. He was looking forward to it. And I served him the scrapple, and he said, "It's not crispy enough." So, I like my scrapple soft, he likes his crispy. No biggies between us. We both became independent and self-reliant early on. We each put ourselves through college and graduate school with loans and hard work. We had no money for college, so we relied on what I call a letter of guarantee from our brother Jerry for each of us. St. Joe's in Philadelphia for me, St. Leo's in Tampa for Mike. Our brother Jerry, a priest of the Diocese of St. Augustine, Florida, wrote a letter to each school our freshman year that said basically this: from one priest to another, let my brother register. And if he doesn't pay, I'm good for the money. It worked. Jerry never paid a cent. 2 last points, Will, before I turn the podium over. Michael didn't just arrive in Eastport and decide to start a garage and a service station. He had a passion for fixing cars, meeting people, and making friends. He was building his family. When he was in high school, he had access to a VW Beetle. I have no idea where he got it. I remember him telling me, "I got to go fix the head gasket." Not knowing how to do that, he goes to the library, looks up the diagram, and decides to order the parts at the local VW dealership in Absecon, New Jersey, across from Vineland. At the dealership, he's greeted by the head mechanic, recently arrived from Germany, who says, "What do you want, kid?" Michael explains. The head mechanic says, "How'd you figure all this out?" "I went to the library." Head mechanic says, "Can you come to work here?" So that started a 4-year summer job program at the VW dealership fixing cars. Great. A brief public health comment and a request. I need my hat for the request, I'm sorry. Yeah. So you recall in August of 2015, Jimmy Carter had melanoma that spread to his liver and brain. He underwent surgery, radiation therapy, and a new kind of cancer treatment called immunotherapy to fight the disease. On June 16th, President Carter said that he did not need any more treatments, but will continue scans and resume treatment if necessary. This is groundbreaking news. It's a new kind of medication that trains the immune system to fight cancer tumors. It's fabulous. Unfortunately, Mike was not a candidate for immunotherapy. He tried. Bernadette and I, 2 days later after that announcement, were invited to a private dinner in Plains, Georgia, and to Sunday school the next day. Jimmy Carter is going to turn 92 on October 1st. He's in fabulous health. He looks very robust. So here's what we know. We're getting better every day at fighting and beating this dreaded disease. It's It's within our grasp, some would say. And if we weren't asking you to remember Michael by contributing to the Annapolis Maritime Museum, we'd be asking you to support the fight and stand up to cancer. Please do both if you can. I want to end by acknowledging and thanking Maggie Cole, nurse oncologist extraordinaire, who's been friends with Mike since Linnea and her daughter went to primary school together. Thank you, Maggie. Maggie's distinguished husband, Dr. Enzer Cole, an oncologist of significant stature, is also here. Both Maggie and Enzer gave their time, professionalism, hearts and souls to support Mike, Shelley, and Linnea. Thank you both, and thank you for coming.
Well, I'm a little daunted to follow David and such heartfelt and humorous remarks about Mike. Those of you who know me know that I tend to be a little more dry and pedantic, being a trained academic. Before I make my remarks about Mike's service to the community through the Annapolis Planning Commission, I want to take a moment to read a citation that was brought to today's gathering by Speaker Mike Bush. This is a House resolution. That is, this represents the thoughts of the entire House of Delegates of the state of Maryland. Be it hereby known to all that the House of Delegates of Maryland extends its sincere sympathy to the family of Michael Francis Miron. Mike's love of his community and dedication to its citizens, Mayor of Eastport and founder of the Maritime Republic of Eastport and the Annapolis Maritime Museum. The entire membership offers its respectful condolences and directs this resolution to be presented on this 11th day of September 2016. I think this was well deserved, and I personally, and I know the family, thanks Delegate Bush, Speaker Bush, for arranging for this to happen. Now, Shelley asked me to talk a little bit about Mike's service to the city on the Planning Commission. Mike and I served together for 6 years on the Planning Commission in the 1980s. And in fact, it's ironic how things in life often join people together in unusual ways. And David's final comments about Mike and his learning to be an auto mechanic and being interested in automobiles had to do with a VW Beetle. Because my wife Sienna and I moved to Annapolis in 1979, and we had a Carmen Ghia. And we asked people, well, you know, we need to get this repaired. Where can we take it to be repaired? And everybody, virtually everybody we spoke to said, go to the Eastport Shell because the guy that owns it, Mike Miron, knows what he's doing and he's honest. And he's a great guy. So take it there. So there we go. We have a Volkswagen connection that we didn't know about. A Mike connection we didn't know about. Well, Mike and I really became friends due to our shared service on the Planning Commission. And I just want to briefly describe to you one issue, one application that we reviewed together, which told me so much about what sort of person Mike was and why I would want someone like Mike to be a friend. And what it was a local gas station who'd been established in town for quite a long time, wanted to put up one of those rain canopies. Now, I said to myself, you know, I'm here, I'm young, I'm in my 30s, I just finished my graduate studies, I'm pretty sharp and thoughtful, and, you know, I'm also interested in aesthetics. What do they need one of those ugly canopies for? And I sort of voiced that less directly on the floor, and Mike spoke up and said, well, you know, Will, and he spoke to, of course, the whole group about being part of the organization for automobile dealer repair shops and gas stations. He had information, he had knowledge, which he shared very friendly, straightforwardly, you know, what it means to the station owner in terms of competitiveness with those that have canopies. Okay, so that made an impact on me. I'm about information. You know, there was Mike. He was prepared. He had read the application. He had thought about what was important about the issue at hand. And then I still was a little hesitant and continued to raise some questions about the application. And Mike said, well, think about people who are on their way to work. They're in a hurry. They're in their suits and ties or their work dresses. You know, they want to look nice when they get to the office, and they realize they have to stop at the gas station. And that said to me, Mike is concerned about the average person, concerned about the things that happen to us in our daily lives. And what little thing can he do, sitting there as a planning commissioner, to help make that life smoother, easier? And so that said to me, Mike is concerned about his community and how what he does in that community affects other people. The other thing that I think that I need to say without referring to anything specific is that empathy that he showed in thinking about other people and how his actions and his decisions and his role in the community would affect others was just one aspect of his constant attempts to be fair and consistent in dealing with everybody. That's what I found in him as a service provider when I first got to know him, going to his station to get my gas and get my car repaired on. And then I saw it only manifested again and again in his work as a planning commissioner, and then as a friend, a valued friend for over 30 years. And I never had siblings, and there are only a few people in the world that I would consider as my brothers by another mother, and Mike would certainly be one of those. And my wife, who times anything I say to the public with good reason, I know she's watching me, and so I'm going to close now with, because I'd pay a lot for it later if I didn't, with a very brief quote by an 18th century British author. They're great for stuff like this. True friendship is like sound health. The value of it is seldom known until it is lost. And I've lost a good friend. In the 1990s, Mike was a leader, the Admiral of Eastport, one of the founders of the Maritime Republic. And I'd like to call a representative now. Okay. I'd like to call Jefferson Holland to the microphone to speak about Mike's role in that rebellious activity.
Thank you. I am here today with actually many ways that I shared my life over the last 35 years with Mike, and this is going to be difficult. Back in the year 2000, this place was just being transformed from the Eastport Historical Committee in the little 600 square foot barge house behind us, and we were contemplating evolving into the Annapolis Maritime Museum and occupying this 9,000 square foot old oyster packing plant. Mike was the genius who created the business plan that helped make that transition happen. He served as essentially the de facto business manager of the new Annapolis Maritime Museum when Ellen Moyer became elected as mayor of the city, and she immediately grabbed him and stole him away from us and made him the economic development director for the city. That left a gap that Peg Wallace, who was the chairman at the time, and Mike asked me to fill. And from that point on, I had the pleasure of, the honor of helping to make this institution grow. This place was, there were cobwebs hanging everywhere. There was a cooler in the corner. We found dead crab carcasses behind it. Mike was optimistic. He said, Peg has this great idea. We can turn this place into a real community center. And we got it up and running just in time for Hurricane Isabel to come right through that door in 2003.
Alice Estrada, the executive director of the Maritime Museum, is going to add a little more to that part of his legacy.
When Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor's office called the museum requesting a private tour, my first reaction was to panic. They had allocated an hour for the tour, and although we're a very cool museum, an hour tour is a stretch here. So then I knew immediately to call Mike Miron. I knew he could embellish this tour with a narrative crafted from all the authentic, distinctive stories of our community. They actually stayed an hour and a half. Mike had taken time over the years to reach out and talk to and record the stories from inspiring individuals who defined the fabric of our community. He was a treasure trove of information. Mike captured the stuff you're not going to find in history books, but is so rich in defining our unique maritime heritage. As Jefferson mentioned, he was very instrumental in forming the Annapolis Maritime Museum as it is today. Of course, that was before my time, but I did hear from several accounts that he was the discipline, and for some business discipline, and that's so important to get a project to move forward. The last 3 years, Mike's been very active with the museum. He was very instrumental in building the Annapolis Maritime Museum's digital archive. This is how we can convert our collections to a digital format and keep them in perpetuity. He loved our local history so much that he would sit up in our hot windowless attic and sort through boxes of stuff, photographs, and of course his love oral histories, and make sure that they were cataloged and organized for forever. Mike, along with his colleague Bill Kogar and John Gudis, I called them my intellectual committee, for the last 3 years were very instrumental in putting together our winter lecture series. Under their guidance, our lecture series has tripled and quadrupled in attendance. We managed to convince Mike to provide a lecture himself on the wooden boat building in Annapolis. It was and still is one of our best attended lectures we've ever had. Mike's contribution of oral histories, research papers, and photographs will be preserved and have an impact forever, and we're committed to that. We will be recognizing Mike in December at the museum's annual meeting with our Legacy Award. Just a handful of recipients have received our Legacy Award to date, but Mike's significant contributions make him an obvious choice. Fortunately, my chairman, Eric Rubin, and I were able to share this with Mike, this honor, before he passed, but he did not need this Legacy Award to validate his significant legacy that he left. Thank you.
We've already heard tremendous things about what Mike gave to the community and the many important interests in his life. But the most important part of his life to him and to all of us is family. And so our last two speakers will be his daughter Linnea and then his wife Shelley. So Linnea.
What do you think? Hey everybody. Okay, I'm gonna have to take these off. So many people have been kind enough to support me and love me and help me in my becoming of a person. And I see so many of you out here. And of all these people, Michael Miron is in a class all his own. One of my earliest memories of him was a tender one. It was shortly after he and my mother had separated. The two of us were in their house on the Eastern Shore one night, dipping hard-boiled eggs into different colored bowls of water and food coloring in preparation for Easter. And he began to cry. His 3-year-old daughter asked him, "Daddy, why are you crying?" "Because," he said, "it feels like no one loves me." Confused and with a furrowed brow, I said a bit sternly, "But Daddy, I love you." And we took it from there. As my Uncle David said, he called me little stuff, and he was big stuff. A pair of kindred spirits moving through the world. A little boy from Philly, whose early years were marked by trauma, taking the hand of a little girl who adored him. The experiences he didn't get to have as a child, he created with me. Mine was a dad longing for joy, fun, adventures, exploration of new places. I won the childhood jackpot. We rode roller coasters and threw ourselves down water slides with reckless abandon. He loved those terrifying slides that are nearly vertical. I would watch with amazement as he would cross his arms over his chest, torpedo down the slide, skid across the water with a tremendous skipping splash, all the while with a huge smile on his face. He meticulously built me an intricate wood-shingled Victorian dollhouse. I made him a screwdriver from a piece of metal and some wood I chiseled in junior high shop class. He presented me with jewelry boxes and window ornaments he had made in the cellar with soldering material and sheets of stained glass. I gave him a leather key ring that I cut, treated, and stamped with MIKE for his car keys. He was pure magic when his hands came into communion with anything edible, and he fed me his creations. And I made him a glazed ceramic trivet for his offerings of soul food to rest on as we shared our meals. For 10 years, I lived in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania with my mother. And during the school year, I would be with my dad in Annapolis for a weekend every 3 weeks or so. He would send me postcards if he was traveling, and greeting cards of paintings of Vermeer's girls or Degas ballerinas to tell me what was going on in his life. We were pen pals at the end of the golden era before computers replaced handwritten correspondence. Those tangible pieces of his love and desire to connect and share himself with me when we weren't together, I saved all of them. In one of his cards, he writes to his 10-year-old daughter that Greg is out of town on a long trip and you're not here either. I really miss my 2 best friends. We explored China with that lifelong best friend, Greg Segretti, when I was 13. It changed my narrow worldview entirely. My mind opened up in awe and wonder and excitement. We strolled the Great Wall, crossed over Tiananmen Square, gazed at languid water buffalo from riverboats, and stood among the terracotta warriors of Xi'an. We bought exotic treasures, antique furniture, pearls and jade, old coins, little broken off pieces of that Great Wall that we pocketed to surround us back home. He asked the Chinese to bring him their spiciest of sauces, spread them on our meals until tears streamed down his beet red cheeks and sweat began to bead on his forehead. And he and Greg and I laughed and laughed and laughed. Just us chickens. One afternoon, he wanted to rest for a bit in the hotel room, but I was bursting with adrenaline from the energy of Hong Kong. pulsing right outside our high-rise window. We had just arrived, and he let me go explore that great city on my own, before the era of cell phones. He trusted me, and he believed in me, and that blossomed into a confidence in myself that was grounded in a deep appreciation and awareness that he was allowing me to go to those edges to test them for myself. And so I wanted to be good for him. And then I came to discover in those moments what it meant to just be good for myself and to aspire to stay in that place. And I always return to him okay, better than okay. A more alive, vibrant, experienced, wiser, expansive, open-minded, open-hearted, grateful human being who couldn't wait to tell her dad what she saw and what she did and who she met, always with gratitude, knowing. From the knowing of the integral part he played in creating those moments for her. And after China, we went on to have many more overseas adventures with Greg, Christina, Will and Sienna Scott, John and Noreen Rice, and so many other fellow adventurers. Dad took the same approach with learning in the classroom too, always offering up the world, options, really quality ones, yet he was so understated about it, never pushing, never forcing, never telling me in which direction I should go. Watching me to see where I gravitated and trusting my choices and what felt right and good to me. I went to the local Montessori school at a very young age with Charlotte Bird, whose little girl Josephine is now part of that family 35 years later. And Charlotte tells me peeing in the same tiny little toilets in the same tiny little bathrooms. In 1992, Dad offered up a change from the public school system of my elementary and junior high years, so I moved in with him, and Severn became my home for 9th through 12th grade. And for me, those 4 years were among the sweetest of our times together. From a young age, I was curious about working and earning money like the grown-ups in my life. I noticed that grown-ups seem to have more freedoms than the kids my age. But at 13, I was too young to be hired into the workforce. I loved being around my dad, so we decided that I would join the family business. He put me behind the counter of the Eastport Shell Station and handed me one of his red Shell Station logo polo shirts, a men's medium. I was 13, but I looked 9. The short sleeves draped down near my wrists, and the tucked-in shirt was so long that I had to keep checking to make sure it wasn't coming out of the bottoms of my shorts. But no matter, I was in heaven. Ringing up customers, buying gas, a Snapple iced tea, and a pack of Newports. Quizzical sailors regarded me with cocked heads as they uncomfortably took their cigarettes from my tiny, tiny hands. While I gazed fondly out the window at my dad walking out of the bays, wiping his hands on a rag, preparing to flirt with the steady stream and captive audience of pretty women at the pumps, or to exchange information about local politics with friends and neighbors. We made a good team. I asked him why customers kept asking me about these things called child labor laws. And he would laugh and say, "But you're so much better at this than the adults that work for me." Those summers turned to fall. He would make me breakfast before school each morning. He packed my lunches. He drove carpool with my friend Ashby's mother, Karen Walsh. Then he went to the Shell station and repaired cars, managed the business's books, oversaw his team of mechanics and tow truck drivers, talked to distributors, and put out the daily fires that come with running a busy and popular sole proprietorship in a tourist town. He would come home in the early evening, grit and oil under his nails and smear it on the front of his shirt, wash up and proceed to make homemade fettuccine alfredo, crab cakes, steaks, steamed artichokes, manicottis, salad with sliced starfruit, a varied menu for me and my friends who started to realize that the always welcoming kitchen on 6th Street, what the always welcoming kitchen on 6th Street was turning out. As Ashby said to me recently, hello, best dinners ever. Later in the evenings, Dad would descend into the cellar to do laundry and iron the pleats of my school uniform for the following day while I did my homework. He was a single working dad by choice, and he was so damn good at it. He was in his own personal flow, and it gave him such joy to see me flourishing under his care in my new life at my new school. The little boy from Philly was healing his own wounds in the most beautiful and generative of ways. On the weekends, he would invite his dear ones into the fold and effortlessly create dinner parties filled with storytelling, affection, sweet silliness, laughter, and culinary delight. I truly can't recall a time when he made a less than delicious meal or when an evening was marked with an average ambiance. It was his genius. It was poetry in motion, and it was unfailing. Through these congregations, year after year, he brought together an exquisite tribe of souls who came to become my aunties and uncles, chosen family. He would sit at the table, I would sit at the table all those years and observe how some friends and lovers would come and go, some through breakups, some through death, and many of you have stayed for decades. I see you here today, and I feel a warm glow inside me that I've never felt before. As I told my friend Jess the other day, I'm starting to understand why people say they enjoy getting older. It's because of this, the experiences of the evolution and deepening of life's relationships. So speaking of getting older, it was at the seasoned old age of 15 that I made the difficult decision to leave the family business. I was ready for less grease and more sophistication. At 16, I was so excited to be given a job down the street at the Chart House. I wore floral dresses, greeted people, and walked them to their tables in the historic boathouse, which had been the primary boatyard for John Trumpy. And I was bored to tears. I asked Kevin Gersandi, the general manager, to relocate me to a different division of the workplace. Kevin skeptically put me behind the raw bar. He handed me an oversized white chef's jacket, probably also a men's medium, and told me to pair it with navy khakis and brown loafers that I didn't mind ruining with food stains. I made clams, casino, and shrimp cocktails. I shucked countless oysters and lay them over ice with lemon wedges. I would come home late at night, my hands and legs weak with exhaustion, and greet my beaming father with bits of seafood under my nails, crusty cream of crab soup splashed across my front, and I loved it. I had found a perfect hybrid of my dad's passions, making food and getting the hands messy in service to others. Tourists and locals alike, East Puerto Rican style. I was my father's daughter, wanting to be like him and feel close to him through my efforts in the world. Once I left his home to create my own life, when I returned after a longer than usual absence, he would jokingly greet me with, "Ah, the prodigal daughter returns," to let me know it had been a while. But so often, I would hear him proudly tell people, "I wish I had 10 more just like her." I don't. That lucky little girl got that father all to herself. And this 38-year-old woman still has all of that fatherly love with her as she keeps moving through this lifetime. And now as he holds hands with her in her heart, Michael Francis Miron embodied this beautiful, paradoxical mix of rugged, masculine practicality, using his hands to fix whatever was broken, or to create something new and pleasurable in service to others, while also possessing a sensual love of beautiful objects and beautiful, good people. Shortly before he died on September 1st, just as a couple of friends walked out of our home after a visit with him, he lay in his hospital bed in the middle of the living room, where he had created a life of laughter and love over the past 35 years. And he began to weep in that struggling, eyes squeezing shut kind of way. His little girl, now a grown woman, sat by his side, and instead of asking her daddy why he was crying, she wept with him and held his hand. He was deeply sad, and she understood why. He said to her, "Sweetie, friends are so important. They are so important." I nodded and told him I hoped someday to have the quality and abundance of kinships I'd witnessed in the weeks leading up to his passing. It was inspiring, humbling, and bittersweet to watch the roles reverse now, to see the caretaker have no choice but to be cared for, with such presence and concern by his tribe, his brother David, and his partner in life's great love, Shelley. To all of you in the room, to the ones who couldn't be here, and especially to Shelley, thank you, and bless you for loving and caring for my father over the years, especially in his final and most desperate time of need this summer. There is no doubt in my mind that after that night in 1981, he never again felt that nobody loved him. The cocoon of sweet support that enveloped him in our home touched him, touched me, and touched Shelley more than you know. Turn that off. Okay.
Not ours, I don't think.
Speak loud. Is there any mic on? Oh, not now? Okay. The mystical poet Rumi said that grief can be the garden of compassion. Grief was a painful childhood companion to my father. It came in the sharpest of ways through the death of his mother, whose soul I imagine he is dancing ecstatically with right now. Dad beautifully and skillfully used his carried grief to make heart-to-heart connections over and over again throughout his lifetime, often in the subtlest of ways when it doesn't dawn on you until afterwards. That alchemy of grief, transformed into kindness and care for the other, was elevated to a higher level of expression in this little corner of the world that was so apparent these weeks. It makes my heart overflow with pride that my dad got it right in this lifetime. He lived and was the embodiment of Rumi's message. He put it into form in his own world and with those who crossed paths with him. And now we are all experiencing the grief that surfaced through his departure from this reality that we're all in together right now. I can feel the compassion blossoming in our shared garden, and the heightened care and deeper connectedness we, as part of Mike Miron's tribe, have for one another. And it wells up in us and spills into the rest of the larger world, to people who didn't even have the good fortune of knowing him. But that's him we're channeling, and we and those other souls are feeling. And so on and so on. thank you all, you angels. And thank you, Dad. I love you. Almost walked away with this.
Yeah, and that would have done something to your dress. Sorry. Well, I just want to say before Shelley speaks that at the end, Linnea said that Dad got it right. There's the proof that Dad got it
Isn't
right.
that the truth? Isn't that the truth? So this is Michael, because he knows I don't do podiums. It was 1996. I had just moved back to Annapolis, and I had a slow leak in the tire of my car. And where do you think people told me to go? Right? So I went over to the Eastport Shell, and I had just driven in from DC. I had on my heels and my business suit on, and I walk into the Eastport Shell, and this man walks out in the uniform with the Shell station thing on it and a little bit of grease under the nails. And he said, "Oh, I can fix that for you while you wait." Okay. And that's how I found myself standing inside the bays of the Eastport Shell station while he rolled that tire in the water. And he started asking me questions. Yeah. And before I knew it, just like that, I was telling him my story. Now, we've heard a lot about the things that he's contributed, and that was really important to me to have that voice in the room, because he's contributed so much to this community. We literally would not know Annapolis the way we do today. It literally would not have the structure that it has today, was it not for the work that he and Will and others, Eileen is here, that did on the Planning Commission. And all of that is what I like to say, it's BS, it's before Shelley. He's done so much. And yet it strikes me that what we contribute is not the same as who we are. And one of the things that Michael was, it's so hard to say that. He was a collector and a teller of stories. My story, Linnea's story, your story, watermen's stories, boat builders' stories, business people's stories. He was a collector and a teller of stories. As I told him my story, I shared with him that I had just moved back, but I had traveled all over the country with my job. And that while I really loved all those experiences and living in all different parts of the country, that what I wanted out of my time in Annapolis was to know neighbors, to know what it was like to be a part of the community, to contribute to the community. Now let me ask you, can you think of anybody better to say those words to than Mike Miron? He said, "Oh, you're a transportation engineer. You need to call Will Scott on the Planning Commission because we got some transportation issues going on." Some things don't change, right? And he gave me Will's phone number.
Only listen to you.
Well, right. And then he said, "You know, we've just started a new comprehensive plan committee. You need to call John Arison and ask him to put you on it. And here's his number." And John, do you remember? You did.
Yeah, I did.
And then he said, "And you need to become involved in the Eastport Civic Association." And he did all that because that's the other thing he was. He was a connector. Look around this room. Who do you see here that you're connected to? Because he facilitated that connection. He was a connector. So a couple years went by, and I would see Michael
at ECA meetings. And we ended up working on the Eastport Gateway Ordinance together. And there was a time when I had to take some maps over to drop off. And he said, that's great, bring them on by. I'm not going to be home, but just drop them in the mailbox. And it's 531 6th Street. So I remember so vividly driving up to 531 6th Street and pulling up in front of the house and thinking, well, that's a pretty cool house. And I walked up the pathway, and the mailbox was right there, and I put the maps in the mailbox, and the front door was then as it is now. It's all this leaded glass, clear leaded glass, very intricate pattern. And I thought, he's not here. No one's watching. And I pressed my face against that glass to try to see what the inside of this pretty cool house looked like. The problem is that the glass slivers are a little tiny, so I went all over the door trying to find one big enough to see inside the house that would become my home for 17 years. And then Michael, he invited me over for dinner. And I said, you mean you want to invite me out for dinner? And he said, no, I want to invite you over for dinner. I'll cook for you. I thought, this should be good. So I went over to dinner, and I don't remember what he made. And I'm so sorry, sweetie, because he'd be able to tell you exactly what he made. And the reason I don't remember it is because I was so stunned. He was in the kitchen doing that skillet thing. Remember how we do with the green beans? And I toss in, like, and then he said to me, he said, so excuse me just a minute, I need to run out back and clip a couple of herbs. And I'm thinking, well, this is not what I expected, but it's getting off to a really good start. That would become, like Linnea, the first of, so many meals that he would make for me and for so many of you. And see, to me, that's the little bitty tip of the iceberg about the other thing that Michael was, and that's a nurturer. And you heard it with Linnea. And for me, see, it wasn't about the fact that he did all the grocery shopping. I had to go to Giant last week. I walked in and thought, they remodeled in the last 10 years. And it wasn't about that he did all the grocery shopping, that he always put gas in the car. I was going to put in the wrong kind of gas, and he said, you didn't know what kind of gas the car takes? He fixed every single thing in the house. He fixed everything in the house. And he made me gluten-free bread every 2 weeks. And the nurturing, it wasn't about any of that. Except possibly the bread thing. That was actually pretty cool. But what it was about, particularly for me, he was a nurturer of my aspirations and my dreams, just like he did for his daughter. Even when those aspirations and dreams weren't his, especially when they weren't his. And he nurtured mine as though they were. He biked next to me as I trained for the New York City Marathon. Now, Michael and I had very different ideas. Actually, I don't really know that. I think we had different ideas about spirituality. And so while I'm doing Qigong and I'm meditating and I'm doing shamanic journeying, that was not Michael's thing. But I'd come back from meditating, he'd say, so tell me about that. I'd come back to a Qigong class and he'd say, tell me about that. I'd come back from running and he'd say, tell me about that. Tell me about it. And that's what he would say all the time, because he was our nurturer. And that brings me to our time in France. Now just imagine that you and your spouse, you're doing great, right? You both have really great jobs. It's going great. The money's coming in, everything feels good, it's easy. and your spouse comes to you, your partner comes to you and says, hey, what would you think if we just like threw all that away and we moved to France for a year? Now, I tell that story in the programs that I do. And Michael has sat in the back so many times and listened to me tell that story. And when I got to that part, when I say, imagine what your partner would say, he would be back there just beaming, because he knew that what they were thinking was not what he said to me. Because what he said to me was, okay, let's do it. And he made that dream his. And he gave it 110% because he was always about supporting my aspirations and my dreams. Michael and I, we've literally traveled the world together. Maggie, you took this picture, remember? My friend Bobby Sue took this picture. We traveled the world together, and even in the traveling of the world together, it wasn't about those experiences, it was about the world we made from those experiences. I will confess that I'd learned a secret. I could get him to go pretty much anything I wanted him to go to, as long as it involved a circus, a farmer's market, or a train. Worked pretty much every time. Michael and I were married in 1999 aboard a Trumpy yacht. It was right after he had organized the Trumpy Yacht Association. Perhaps some of you remember that weekend in Annapolis when City Dock was lined with Trumpy yachts. It was a great day for the city of Annapolis, all those yachts coming back home. We were married aboard one of those yachts. Now at the time, Michael's friends, and since then, teased him a lot about me. They would say something like, how did a guy like you get hurt? For 17 years, I didn't know the answer until Linnea told me. She said, he picked you. Guess what? He picked you. He picked all of us. With every little kindness, every little tenderness, every jar of jam, he picked us. God, he loved the canning, the tomatoes, the pickles, the jam, the applesauce from the apples in our backyard. Who here has ever received a jar of jam or jar from Michael? Right. Keep your hands up if you still have the jar. Yeah. We come home and there'd just be piles of jars outside the back door. He picked us. And it was Linnea that articulated it for me. She said she was watching all these people come by, and the cards and the letters and the text messages and all the things. And she said, we are his life's work. We're his life's work. Aren't we the lucky ones? We aren't the only thing that was his life's work. It's been mentioned about his history and the work that he's done here. He's done 150 oral histories because he's a teller and collector of stories. He literally has the voices of the people who've made this community. 150 of them. File folders full of information. And I'm so happy to say that we're working with the museum, the staff, the volunteers to begin that tedious process of cataloging all of that information so that they can digitize it, so they can preserve it, so we can make it available so other people get to hear the stories that were so important to him to tell. And that's the reason that when people have asked, what can we do? That we say, help the museum. Because that's going to help them take those stories that Michael cares so much about and give them to others. Michael was in the hospital when I told him that he didn't have a future. And I watched as that understanding began to spread across his face. And I watched as his eyes began to glisten. And he looked at me and he said, "I'm gonna miss you so much." And now Michael is off on some grand adventure that I can't participate in. Maybe just a tiny little bit. And we're the ones that are going to miss him so much. And I hope that is some consolation to you as it is to me, to know how lucky we are, how lucky we've been. I only got 17 years. There's some of you that got over 30. Oh my God, 30 years. Linnea's entire life. We're so lucky. And for me, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. I got to live the life of my dreams with the man of my dreams. And let me just tell you, there is nothing like it in the world. Thank you so much for being part of this today. He would have loved knowing that you love him. I just wanted to end it on a high note for you.
You know, a lot of the speakers have spoken about what a happy man Mike was and how much he loved a good time. And he was my friend for more than 30 years. And I never saw him so happy as he was every day after Shelley. Now, we're not really finished quite yet, because if anybody who's here today would like to say a few words about Mike, some memory, some incident, some card game, or some Redskins game you went to, anything at all, we would invite you to simply stand, and we don't have a microphone to pass around or anything, but please.
John Hamm wants to speak.
John, go for it. You actually get a microphone.
I do. I met Michael in 1981 when my then 5-year-old daughter Laura and her 8-year-old sister Katie knocked on Michael's door to sell brownies, cookies, Girl Scout cookies. And, you know, Michael was charming to those children. Then at their young age, and I just wanted to read a message that Laura, upon learning of Michael's impending death, wrote, and we shared it with him. Now, this is out of the mouth of babes, only she's 39 now. So she wrote, "Michael Miron, I can't say your name without saying your full name. Not sure why, but Michael Miron, I sure do love you. You fill my childhood memories, and they're always laughing memories. Annapolis includes you in my mind, always will. Much love, and a hearty," and you've probably heard Michael do this, "Auga!" Michael, just to share a couple of things that we really haven't talked about. Michael, the little boy. Michael had a little boy in him, and he loved mischief and jokes, and he was delightful, always delightful. And the Auga, and you know, lots of other things, and you all, if you knew him well, you've seen Michael do little shticks and funny things that just you'll never forget. And on a serious note, the loss of friends is so hard, and it's especially hard as we get older and you start losing more and more of them. And I try to take lessons from that, and life lessons. And I think the life lesson that I've taken from knowing Michael, traveling with him, enjoying Cotignac in 7 years ago, or was it 9? And spending so much time over the years, just having delightful times, but seeing Shelley and Mike take that dream, make it a reality, do those things while they could, was a real lesson to me. And so my wife and I have decided, instead of taking 1 week rather, in someplace warm in February, we're going to stay longer this year, right? And our traveling companions who were only going to come for part of it are now coming for all of it. So we're all taking that lesson. And I just want to say, I will forever and ever miss my friend Michael.
Elaine.
So many people have said just such great stories about Mike. So I have an old story that I wanted to share with Shelley and Linnea. I got to know Mike as my boss. He joined the planning commission, and this was in the midst of all the wars with the Maritime Inn and what was going to happen to our waterfront. It was all going to be walled off. When Mike joined the commission, Will was on the commission, Jay was on the commission. This was in the mid-'80s. Mike's, of course, first recommendation was what? We take a field trip. That's why I love how to start. He said, why don't we we hadn't gone anywhere. We can leave Annapolis. Why don't we take a field trip to Newport? Why don't we take a field trip to Newport for several days? So all of us went up to Newport at Mike's encouragement. We spent several days there and came back really excited and inspired how we were going to find just like Newport, although we did a better job. And the problem was we didn't have a plan. And we were all, Will was an academic, I was, a typical bureaucrat. And it was Mike who said, I never forget it, he used to call all of us minor government officials. More of ourselves than it was appropriate. He would say, all of us, you minor government officials, you're going to come and go. You're not going to accomplish anything. And he said, the secret here is to excite the long-term residents of Eastport. You excite them and get them to make a commitment, and you can move on, and they'll do all of this. And Mike did just that, where I would see total chaos with the voting people, fighting with the residents, fighting with the property owners. Mike saw an opportunity. It was so classic Mike. And he went to get the voting industry, like Larry Belkoff and all these incredible people, sailmakers, Chabin, and got them together with the civic associations, because this was a very unlikely combination. These people had never gotten together with each other. And Mike basically said to them, you know what, you have a common interest. You, the civic groups, you all don't want your waterfront rolled off with intense development and high rises. And you, the voters, you want to be able to keep your boatyards. Why don't you guys get together and do it? And that, the rest of it is history. So when we sit here 30 years later, it was 30 years ago, and we look at, we look at the yards around us, we look at the sailboats coming by, we have much more to that. So thank you very much.
Story about Mike. We love Mike. We're big fans of Mike, and I would say the reason West Creek, the Arts District, is what it is today. I think Mike was a big driving force behind that. He got us straight away. But my favourite Mike story And we've been inspired by this here. And I'd say, Eastport is an inspiration for the Arts District, it's an inspiration for West Street. We dream about having this kind of community spirit. And Mike got community straight away. But my favourite story is when we were doing the site where Lemongrass is in Metropolitan and Hudson Touquet. The Economic Development Office was right next door, and Jody and I, to save a buck or two, decided we'd take the asbestos tiles off ourselves. And so Mike would come out from the office with a cigarette and he'd watch us and just shake his head. He probably even bagged some of the asbestos. That's the sort of guy he was. And so thank God for Eastport and thank God for Mike Miron.
Speaker, real quickly, I got to meet Michael Miron when I first came down to Rank Rock. I was banging on doors in Eastport. I come down the end of the street and I was sitting on that Shell station. What a great location for a Mike Bush on. One night, and I kept watching this guy come in with the Shell stuff on and off, grease from his nails and everything. And when I got the courage, I said, Mike Bush, Mike Miron, said, what's the chance to put the sign up there? He said, I'd like to let you do it, but I'd still like to sell gas here. And he had a great sense of humor. I think the reason we're all here today to celebrate is because we all touch this in a great individual way. And he used to come up to the State House because when Revolution took place, I actually lived the other end of Eastport and I was made the official ambassador to the mainland. And they would bring up old combs from Leon Wolf's barber shop and things of that nature up to the State House. And then one day he came up and said, I'm getting married. You're getting married? Burn back like yourself. And he said, I really fell in love, and of course with Shelley, and I got to meet her, and he said, well, what do you think? I said, well, if you don't marry her, Mike, you'll have arrested for mental insanity. I went on to do that, and of course they were always into something. I love it when he'd come up and say, Shelley was training for the New York Marathon. In the back of my mind, I was thinking, I was training for the Eastport Bridge Run. He's old French's anchorman. But he was a great person to be around. And when you look in the dictionary and you see community leader, starts off the name Mike Miron. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Ross? Sorry, I just got here. Although I have to race, so I'm right off the boat, so well, I didn't know at the time. I knew Mike just passing in the hallways at Maryland when we were in graduate school that we were going to become next door neighbors. Actually, we sort of got reacquainted about graduate school after we became neighbors. But I told the story at Mike and Shelley's house the other night. I met Mike, actually, I was introduced to Mike before I ever met him, because when we bought our house, the owner left us a nice letter telling us about everything that was wonderful about Eastport. And in the letter he said, if you ever get invited to Mike and Shelley's house, we're going to drop everything. So obviously we've lost a great neighbor, a friend, and a colleague. We got to talk about a lot of things, economic development and economics in general. So very sad. Very sad. Where's open?
I just wanted to, my name's Jess Hacker, and my husband and I moved to Eastport on the day of the succession, actually. And we threw our bags into our new apartment, we moved here from Bethesda, and we were like, we moved to the best place ever. There's a party going on outside. And then very soon after, we met Mike at the gas station and became friends. And over the last 18 years that we've lived in Eastport, Mike has always been there in a number of different ways. And even most recently, this spring, we started a new baseball team at Eastport Elementary to try to connect the community with the Eastport Elementary, which could be a little bit disconnected. And I sent out an email to a bunch of people. And the very first person to respond was Mike, and he sent a check-in to sponsor the baseball team and to tell a little bit about the history of baseball and how the original team in Eastport was known as the Bone Crushers, and how we were talking about it, how there may not be an appropriate name for an Eastport Elementary team but historical, and that was just such an important part of Mike. And when Apple called, when he passed away, they called me, and I was up at my dad's farm, and we had this long conversation, and they didn't to say what I really wanted to say, what I had said that they didn't put in the paper, which was the thing about Mike that was so important is exactly what everyone said. He was a connector, and he cared about the whole community by caring about each individual person in the community. Each one of us is here because he cared individually about us, and the community of Eastport is what it is today in the city of Annapolis because of caring about each individual person. And our little baseball team and every single person in the team. I lost a job one day some years ago, and Mike cared so much about me. It changed my whole perspective on that day. And I think we all just thank Mike so much for everything that he's done, for caring about each one of us individually and making us a better community because of that.
Hey, Will. Gary. Yeah, I see Dick Garrity back there. Back in 1972, I bought a building on 4th Street from him. At the time, it was primarily a residential street, and we had a wonderful time. Mike was a very good friend, and in 1978, just a few years later, the property immediately next door was coming up for public auction. And I went to Mike and I said, Mike, I'm in a little bit of trouble here because, this is Eastport and it's the 1970s and we kind of all been having a little too much fun. And so I wasn't really in a position of going ahead on this on my own. And Mike said, don't worry, Gary, I can help you out. So he and I went to the public auction together, and lo and behold, Mike became a property owner on 4th Street with me as his partner. And we had a wonderful time, a long-time association. And I think the point of it is that Mike really has represented everything about Eastport and the community from the time of the 70s and Marmaduke's and all of the whatever else was going on, and the sailing community, and all of that fun to the evolution of Eastport, where it's become more of a residential community, and it's, shall we say, a little more settled. He's even been the godfather of my wonderful daughter. What can I say? We all love him. He's touched every one of us in one way or another, shall we say, and that he was always been a wonderful friend and always willing to help anybody who asked.
Well, since Gary brought it up, since I have a relationship with the truck, everybody remember my truck? Yes.
Oh, yeah. Still there? Still there.
It is a story, if you look at all of the things that are on that truck, it is a story of the things that he was involved in, particularly political history. Since I chaired our Public Places Commission, I have suggested that instead of sending that truck off to a charity, that we at least take the back of it off as an icon of
It's sitting there on my jack right now.
I know it is. It's been that.
I think it's a piece of sculpture. Put it in front of my studio on 4th Street.
Well, I agree with you, so maybe you and I can work together to see that. I do want to mention one other thing, is that issue out there that everybody likes to is the market house. Mike always had an idea, saw things that other didn't. And at one time, the market house was filled except for one corner. It was vacant. And he came and said, guess what? You know who I think I could get to be in that little corner? You can look up. And so it went from this little corner to, no, it's going to be the whole place that Dean DeLuca wanted. That didn't turn out, and it had nothing to do with Mike or me on reported. It had to do with a lot of other reasons for the corporation that occurred in New York. But nevertheless, he saw opportunities and he saw things and he went after them. And all the other things that you remember that you can see are part of that great vision that he had and that fun thing that he always wanted to make happen. And now we'll work on the icon.
Ellen, maybe you should speak to Shelley about the truck and make an application to the Arts Council. Just say it.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I was fortunate enough to follow Shelley as the Civic Association president years ago. She was so organized, as we said. But about that same time, I got to design the renovation to their house. So this was around 2000, which was really fun at the time, but I was so proud recently to be asked to redesign their kitchen. And being there, when I was working with them, and how important, and I knew Mike, across the years, and he loved to cook. And I take pride in, trying to address whatever people really want, within their kitchen, and watching the two of them try and resolve this thing that Mike had cooked, and I understood that he was so closely related to his kitchen over so many years, and I'm so upset now that he got to the thing that it took so much for him, between the two of them, to put this thing together and make such a beautiful thing, and he only got to use it for about a year. And I just want to say how proud I was to be able to help him do that thing, and I just wish that he was able to share it with you a little bit more.
Well, you've all shared some marvelous memories. I think we've all been moved by what most of the speakers, this one excluded, have had to say. But as we wrap up and depart, I think that Shelley would agree with me that we've heard how much Mike meant to the community, how many different ways he contributed to the community. But the one thing that we'll all remember, the one thing that brought us here, at least from the way that I'm seeing the room and all of you, is he was a great friend to every single one of us. Thanks for coming.